The following podcast is brought to you exclusively by the Rad Rob Radio Network. He's a member of wrestling royalty. His repertoire and skills in the ring are unmatched. He's always been loyal, trustworthy, and has a work ethic that is unparalleled. He's been bashed by his peers, by the media, and even by the fans. But he's living proof that our worst days do not define us, and neither can other people. Welcome to Rebuilding the Foundation with Teddy Hart.
Some great matches, but I want to ask Teddy a question, man. And this is about your family and something that happened that was a tragedy with your uncle, with Owen. Do you feel like they should have stopped that show?
Again, two sides to the story. I understand Vince has got an audience of people that I think the audience even know what happened, so they don't know if that was a rib or a work, and it was maybe they were supposed to happen as part of the show. So even if they say it's not part of the show, it still could be part of the show, and the fans are being tricked. So at that stage, I'm thinking, might as well run it, get it over with, and then deal with the death after that, because Vince has got so many other commitments to TV deals and syndication and commitments to pay-per-view that maybe it's illegal for him to stop the show. Where the NFL is its own league, so they can do that. Where Vince is he's independent to all these buildings and all these contracts. Where maybe it's a breach of contract not to have the event because it's already been paid for, and the amount of headache giving refunds or setting up another date for a game or for a show would have been impossible, because people aren't thinking about it from Vince's end. I think Vince generally would have stopped the show for sure. Like, had no problems. He knew that, but he doesn't have that right or choice. It's not just him. It's so many people that go up the food chain, from all the way from satellite to space to the banks that program the pay-per-view that get the money, credit card automatically debited out of your account when you hit fucking yes, I want to watch this with your remote control. And that mechanism, I don't know the complexity of what a deal for syndicated TV, what your guarantee is. If you run a pay-per-view and you also cancel the pay-per-view and 1 million people buy it, and fucking how long does it take to get their money back? And how many people are going fucking crazy or complaining? Or is there a refund available? Is that even possible to give once you've got it? So I don't know if that was the reasons or deciding factors on why they continued the show. Instead of everybody trying to say, oh, he's an asshole, he's not classy. They did. He was very upset. They loved Owen Hart, and he's one of their family. So I think that they would definitely, if anyone would have got the show stopped, I think if Vince's son had died, it would have been the same fucking thing. If Shane died doing a fucking dive, Vince would have had to still keep running the show. I don't think it was any favoritism or any specific. I think it was just the business. There's so much business that goes into being a man that no one has a fucking, because they have never walked into shit. I've walked a little bit in a few people's shoes, and I've seen enough of the business and been around it long enough to know the contractual obligations of lawyers and contracts with NHL and NFL and different things. So, but WWE is not that type of league. It's not a league. And again, because they're pay-per-view, that NFL is not on pay-per-view. That was a pay-per-view. It wasn't Monday Night Raw. Big difference again, too. So you have to look at all the variables when you make that decision on answering that question.
And it happened literally at the beginning of the pay-per-view. So that's that's a good point. Now,
just think about the money lost on people leaving the building early and not buying things, eating food. That could be $1 worth of revenue that the building's not getting, just for commissary, just session and merchandise. And all of a sudden, that shows. And how many people ordered it on pay-per-view? Probably over 1 million people ordered it. So if 1 million have to be refunded their money, and like I say, that's a fucked up situation. Obviously, it just sounded like that was the easiest way to make everybody to get out of it alive, financially, contractually obligated to these things that they had to have to go on.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. I know when that happened, I don't think the fans even like watching live, right? They even knew what the hell was going on because it happened so fast.
Oh,
that was awful. That was awful.
I feel bad for Jim Ross having to tell everybody that. I mean, that's a heavy thing to do. I mean, he loved Owen as well. Everybody did. But to to hear that your friend is dead and you got to tell, you know, a million people that Owen Hart has just passed away as a result of an accident.
It was so bad. Sitting at home when I heard my career basically was over at that stage. I remember thinking probably the last chance I'm going to have with being really protected and giving a push through nepotism by being related to Owen, because Owen's so well. I'm there by myself. Owen's on the road. I'm on the Story Funk Dojo. So I'm not on the road with him yet, but I'm signed. So there was plans to me being the Blue Blazer, protect my ties, and to give me some time for a mask to get to know, you know, how to work the big guy style with all the different guys, because I was all at the time. And Owen had talked to me a few times about being the Blue Blazer, the pressure about being on the road, and I'm looking forward to me getting on the road with him, and we could travel together, and he would teach me stuff and make sure I did look out for me. And he was gone. Dude, this is so crazy, so messy now, and the family's even more ripped because it was first Brett punching Vince out, right? That whole thing already, it was still fresh and really not smart to have happen, and very dangerous for everyone as a career suicide for the whole family. Basically, I still think they say that TJ, Nat, Harry's careers were a quarter of what they could have been if Brett was in there the whole time. And Eddie Hart would have been a world 10 times, and at the best matches, like Shawn Michaels, and Stone Cold, and off Jeff Hardy, Matt, Bob Van Dam, go on, Eddie Guerrero, Benoit. I lost out, and the WWE lost out on billions of dollars of revenue by not being able to use the oldest grandson of Stu Hart, third generation, with technique and prop and real serious training that went into me and my student TJ, one of the greatest technical wrestlers ever out there, and one of the best coaches, and so easy to work that almost everybody that ever worked Tyson Kidd said he was almost the smoothest, easiest guy to work ever, and just so helpful. And Harry, these guys were phenomenal. Harry had his first professional match at 8 years old in front of Vince. He wrestled, I think, when he was 9, in front of Vince McMahon, and 14,000 people at the Battledome. And he did 4 matches, I think 3 or 4 matches for Vince. All excited, ready to go, and then the bombs dropped. Brett punched out Vince. Davey Boy's leaving, filming. Who knows what happened? The whole situation just flipped and fell apart like a mother. Neidhart's gone. The whole situation turns to hell. And then they're all dead. And then that looking at a road that's just not, it doesn't look like a fun road to be on. I don't want to be on the road. And there's no reason to push me because the Hearts are directly connected to Brett getting a royalty check. So if we're pushing the Hearts and Brett Haynes being mentioned in any capacity, then Brett's getting a royalty check for stuff that he's got nothing to do with from a company that he punched out the number one guy. So another one of those things where it was like, wasn't just Owen dying, it was the family dying. The whole fucking dream, everybody, you know, Owen was the fucking bridge. He was the last bridge, the last leg to keep that connection and to keep that relationship going. And when he was gone, it was gone. I still think to this day, like I say, that broke the camel's back.
Before that, before his awful passing and that tragedy, did Owen look at moving over to WCW as well when Brett did?
Nope. They offered Owen extra money. They doubled his contract, I was told, and Owen didn't agree with what Brett did. Owen never liked that. Didn't agree with it. He just didn't. Owen said Brett should have been, from what I was told, and Brett wants to argue with me, or fucking Brett's never been a huge fan of mine, and I say this because I just think Brett was he was always worried about becoming. He was selling himself as a father and a great human being and a husband. All these things, you know, that's fine. So when his son did not get in the ring to become a professional wrestler, and poor Dallas decided not to get in the ring and wrestle, it broke Brett's fucking heart. And Brett automatically, I think his mind went a certain way that he didn't want necessarily that every other kid in the family was wrestling. I'm wrestling, TJ's wrestling, Harry's wrestling. We're all connected. It's all the family. Brett's sons don't wrestle. Brett's supposed to be the fucking best there is, the best was, best there ever. So his son, I really believe he wanted to pass that on to his son. He had a ring in the house, and he had the best coach there. Leo Burke was phenomenal. I was there. And it was a huge opportunity for Dallas to get in the ring and wrestle. And when he said he didn't want to wrestle, it completely changed Brett's idea about us. And I think we went from being partners and friends to all of a sudden competition in some capacity, or people are going to ask the question of, well, where's Brett's kid? Why are these guys so good? And where's Brett's kid? And why is he doing it? And then all of a sudden it was like, after that, obviously none of it was done on purpose, but I know when we came back, we wrote we were in WWE the second time, Brett conveniently wrote his book at the exact time we were about to go on TV. And when I got fired from Johnny, he told me specifically Brett's book is so detrimental to the wrestling world and to the family, obviously for any future endeavors with the family, that Brett, you should read the book before you get any emotion about being released. I said, okay, well, I'm being released. Like, yeah, we're going to have to let you go. We're not keeping any of the Harts. Natalia Neidhart, Harry Smith, and TJ's Wilson, or Tyson Kidd, whatever, but he's not a Hart, so we don't want anything to do with the Harts anymore. And once you read your uncle's book, you understand that. And I read Brett's book, and Brett badmouthed every fucking person in power. He badmouthed Hogan, he badmouthed Flair, he badmouthed Triple H, he badmouthed Shawn, he badmouthed Vince, badmouthed Shane, badmouthed every fucking person in there that had power. Brett talked shit about. And that's his career suicide for everybody else. And Brett should know that we all make money wrestling. It's going to burn the bridge behind you. He just killed all of our fucking careers off. He's such a good person for some things and such a wonderful wrestler that it's hard to say that. But it's like, what do you think the consequences are if you punch a mafia boss in the face?
Yeah, that's right? Wild. I never thought about it that way, because
he just killed all of our careers off.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way, because if the first time that I ever saw Harry, and now Harry's actually a coach with Scientific Wrestling with Jake Shannon. He's a solid shooter. Harry, who's British Belt Junior. The first time I ever saw him, and I think a lot of fans, first time they ever saw him, was on Hogan Knows Best. Remember, he was on there with Brooke Hogan. I remember seeing, I said, man, he's a big guy. And then he came on the scene, and I never thought about that. His career must have been held back because of the past and days. So yeah, I mean that certainly hurt the family name, because at that point there was only really one place to go, right? Because WCW had folded.
Brett knew better. He knew that we were coming up to, and I don't know why he was like that, but Brett was so protective over being the only one that had the power and the only one to call Vince and have the connections. And when he finally brought Owen in, there was a conversation that Owen had with me about that Brett kept Chris Benoit out of WWE for years. That he didn't want Chris in there because he was so technical. Chris said Brett wouldn't have the same sign. It would be another guy that's kind of wrestling that style. And so I was told that Brett kind of kept Chris Benoit out. And when Owen and Chris Benoit spoke about that situation, because I think Chris was there after, and I think Chris and Owen were there together because Brett left WCW. And I think maybe, I'm not sure if Chris went back to WCW after Owen died. I just know that when I talked to Chris, he told me that he had a conversation with Owen, and that Owen was quite frank about it, about that he felt that Brett had to keep a certain leash on everybody that's in his group, that he wanted to make sure he was always, that's why he badmouthed poor Davey Boy. Davey Boy had that match at Wembley Stadium with Brett, and Brett wrote in his book that Davey Boy was fucked up on drugs. And it didn't need to be mentioned because the match was great, so nobody was thinking Davey was fucked up because nobody could see it. So Brett's going again behind the scenes and revealing shit that no one's supposed to hear about. And I got a documentary where I asked Brett to say something about me, and Brett's like, well, Teddy Hart needs to shut his mouth. It's like, Brett, you talked more shit than anybody and did more crazy shit to the owner of the company and affected everybody's fucking jobs, whether you were justly doing it or it was rightful for you to, you had it wasn't smart. You can't do that. And you come from a promoter's background. My grandfather was furious. He always said fucking it wasn't a smart move, and that'd have been the same as Bad News Allen not liking a finish and punching Stu in the face. And I understand Brett was loyal to Vince and he wanted to stay. And Brett, there's a lot of variables, so it's not an easy subject to talk about. I just know that the end result cost the WWE a lot of money, and it cost the fans a lot of great matches, because the Hart kids that came up have been wrestling since they were kids. We were the best wrestlers on the planet, and if they'd given us the time to grow properly. What's the difference of Randy Orton and Teddy Hart? Bret Hart was way more famous than Bob Orton. Owen Hart was way more famous than Bob Orton. Davey Boy was more famous than Bob Orton. Bob Orton Sr., Stu Hart's got a bigger name. So if you're pushing names, even Flair, his sons don't have the same name as WWE because they were WCW guys. And say who else has sons coming up or family coming up? Well, the Samoans do. Well, you protect them. It's a family. Bret's not protecting any of us at all. And he never, ever came back with anything to help anybody out except himself until the very end. And then it was too late. He wants to shake hands with Shawn and say everything's okay. He still goes in bad mouth Triple H every chance he can get.
Yeah.
Speaking of, I wanted to ask you. This is something you probably never been asked, because you had this issue that we all know with this reality show, right? And the misrepresentations and so forth. Well, I always found it kind of odd that during the whole situation with Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, that there was this reality show going on, and that they had all this access with WWE. And if you watch that Wrestling with Shadows, they kind of predicted like what was going to happen, because even leading up to the Montreal Screwjob deal, like in that show, they talked about the potential for a Screwjob. But I could never understand, and I'm from the outside kind of looking in, because you're with the family, and I want to ask you, how did Bret Hart not see that whole thing coming, man?
I heard two theories. One, that Bret was in on it. Bret swears to God he wasn't. A few guys I've heard say that Bret for sure knew about it. 123 Kid, I think he was the one that told me, X-Pac told me that he Bret knew for sure, and that he took it and did it he took the dive on purpose. He knew he was getting fucked anyway. I don't know. And I just, from how Bret reacted to it, I don't think Bret knew what happened. And I think Bret blindsided, which made Bret should have been
but this is the thing. This is the thing. If you go back and you watch that, they didn't sell it as if Shawn Michaels won the match. They sold it as a screw job. The whole thing was sold as a screw job, which, again, I look at things very analytically and very different than most people. If you take a step back and you actually watch that, and you watch the reactions that were caught on tape, the whole thing to me, in retrospect, looked like it was a work.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree 1,000%. I still believe to this day that it was a work.
Yeah, I think if you're in the moment, and this is the great thing about being a fan, guys. This is the great thing about being a fan, and I've been a wrestling fan since I was a little boy. But I just want to say this, because you get wrapped up into it as a fan, and that added a whole other layer, right?
Vince got punched in the head for sure. That was for real, and there were people that saw that weren't being prompted. So if he punched Vince in the face for real, and so there had to be some aspect of it being real, because Bret would not have punched Vince McMahon in the face. I mean, that's a fuck.
But I heard this from Scott Hall before he passed. Yep. He said how Vince's hair was all messed up and he sold the punch. Vince went on TV and sold the punch afterwards. He had the black eye, and if the thing had really been a real legitimate screw job, I don't think it would have been worked the way it was. It was never presented that Shawn Michaels made him tap out in his own move. It was, the whole storyline was presented as a screw job to the fans.
Yeah, because I think, from what I was told, I don't know if Jim Ross knew. I don't think Jim Ross knew what the fuck was going on. I don't know if he was in on it or not. I mean, I wanted to think that guy. I've watched Bret carry fucking burden for years, and he's never got over it. And he's a great actor. But he gave away the business not to protect it. He wasn't protecting the business. What did they gain from that rift happening?
Well, I mean, they gained the whole evil Vince McMahon character, and then they overtook WCW in the ratings subsequently. I mean, it just seems to me that when it happened as a fan, I bought into it. But when I look at it now, with a legal mind and analytically, and you go back and you watch it, it looks like the whole thing was a work to me.
Well, let me ask you this, Teddy. Just think about this for a second. Let's just presume that it was a work. Vince and Bret, maybe Pritchard, maybe Briscoe, knew about it, but Vince and Bret set it up. They had to make it look legit. Vince knew he was going to get potatoed, so he let Bret punch him. Bret goes to WCW. You're telling me that they don't know how to fucking market Bret Hart? Like, I think he went there to get intel on WCW or possibly fuck them up so WWE can take over and come back to WWE. But that got fucking derailed when dipshit Goldberg kicked him in the fucking head and gave him a concussion. I think the plan was for Bret to come back in the end.
Yeah, and he ended up eventually coming back.
I wish I could agree on that. There's just, I'm not going to say there's no fucking way, but I'm betting my life almost that there's so much lost money on the table, guys. You're talking millions of dollars. If Bret Stone Cold Steve Austin had that kind of match, what's the combination of Chris Benoit, Teddy Hart, Edge, Christian versus Batista, Randy Orton, Cody Rhodes, and fucking Ric Flair or Triple H or Shawn Michaels? You're talking so many money matches that are completely down the toilet. Third generation versus third generation. Who are the two kings of the third generation? Rock's a third generation, Teddy Hart generation, Cody Rhodes is third generation.
Right.
You cut out a whole group of third generation guys that for no reason. The money they had already invested in the Hart family was millions of dollars, guys. Then top and Stu selling the territory, which protected all of us from getting jobs.
Yeah.
There's no fucking way Owen goes from being top guy working with, and then all of a sudden he's in a fucking mask falling out of a fucking roof of a building with the event called Over the Edge. You know, so it's just,
so Teddy, why did they sell it as an angle? They sold it. They didn't sell it as a screw job, legit. They sold it
because they couldn't. They don't want the commentary. WWE's two things, guys. You have to remember, WWE tries to play good guys, but then they're assholes in the back. So they don't need the fans on TV thinking that the company itself fucked Bret. Vince fucked Bret. But Jim Ross is not Vince. Jim Ross is just the commentator. He's calling it the way he sees it. So if Jim Ross knew it was a fucking shoot or a work or whatever it was, there's no way when he sold it and Bret's reaction and then to spit on Vince's face. And the whole situation
so if it was a shoot, why capture that on television? You know, why show? But it was all part of the show, the way they captured that, and then subsequently, do you remember when Shawn Michaels, he calls out like that Bret Hart's going to come back, and then it's the midget wrestler that's dressed like Bret Hart that comes to the whole thing afterwards. They worked it as an angle afterwards. I mean, they kind of threw it in the fans' faces afterwards. They never tried to say that Shawn Michaels won that match. They worked the whole thing as an angle.
You have to remember what they said was Bret did shit. That was not the argument. Nobody cared about who won the match. Everyone knew wrestling was fake at that stage. They got exposed right after that on Wrestling with Shadows. So it wasn't the point. The point, and I understand what you're saying, but they knew that was the whole reason. It was becoming a shoot. So the fans were finally starting to see what had happened. The whole point of this angle was trying to make it look like two guys that normally like each other have started to hate each other. So these guys really hate each other. Even though they're working together, they don't like each other. And Bret fought him in the back 2 times, dude, and ripped his fucking hair out and beat the shit out of him in the back. Sure. And Sean quit.
Then how in the Wrestling with Shadows were Bret and Sean sitting there in the locker room arguing, you know, and Sean claiming he didn't know about that? Was acting, man. I mean, I got to tell you, go back and watch it. I mean, that was acting. You know,
Sean knew exactly what was happening. Sean said later he knew what was happening. He just told Bret he didn't. Sean and Triple H made a deal with Vince.
But Teddy, do you buy into that when that was filmed on Wrestling Shadows that Bret wasn't in on it? If you watch it, it looks like he was. I mean,
what I think Bret was in on. I think Bret was in on the possibility that it could happen. And if it happened, it allowed him to punch Vince. Bret was heartbroken because Vince wouldn't fucking take his side. Vince went with Sean and Triple H. Bret was usually the winner. Bret was usually in the group conversations. Bret was like the top guy. Him and Undertaker had the most say. When Triple H and Sean came in, then they got rid of Kevin Nash and Razor Ramon, which weakened Sean's fucking power base. But Triple H went straight for the fucking throat. He went for Stephanie. He got Stephanie. Once he had Stephanie, checkmate. Bret now has to listen to Triple H. Bret's like a spoiled baby. He's the number one son. All of a sudden, now there's a new golden son that comes. Triple H is there with Stephanie, and Shawn Michaels is just as valuable and just as good, because it's hard to have another guy as good as Brett, but Shawn was that one motherfucking guy who's as good as Brett and younger. So Brett and Shawn know that they're going to have a screw job. Shawn's going to say, well, whatever he has to fucking say to get out of the situation. They can talk in the back. You have to remember, guys, they had to coexist all those other months and months and months. They had to coexist, even if they were enemies. They used to be really good friends.
Guys,
but they got so competitive. He likes the competitive. He likes making guys compete, even though it's not real, for his love and his power. And then so when Shawn got the power, the first thing he did was he made sure that there was a choice, that Brett was either gone or he was gone. And then and this is what the A&E documentary revealed. You don't see a lot of the shit in Wrestling with Shadows until you look at the A&E documentary. Then you realize Brett was heartbroken that he was told, no matter what, we don't want you here, even though you want to stay, you have to go to WCW. And that's the only reason I give Brett the out, where I'm like, I can understand that. When you try to stay and you try to be loyal, and then you're told, no, we don't need you, we don't want you, you need to go to WCW, and they orchestrated the whole thing for Brett to turn into a heel. They turned Brett into a heel so he'd have less power when he went to WCW. They didn't want Brett, the Hitman Hart, to be the fucking king when he went to WCW. They wanted him to be they wanted to be fucked up amongst the boys. They wanted the boys to hate Brett. So Shawn sent the message to Ric Flair, Kevin Nash, Razor Ramon, Scott Steiner, all those guys. They weren't big fans of Brett. Kevin Nash was the only one that really liked Brett. Razor Ramon didn't really like Brett. I don't think he ever fucking got over there was an incident with him. I was in rehab with Razor for 2 months. He wasn't a fan. Triple H couldn't stand him. Shawn couldn't stand him. Vince became very tired of the arguing with Brett about angles and all these different things that normally Vince says black is black, it's black is black. There's no debate. But they all started they'd been there long enough to be able to bitch to Vince and complain to Vince, and then Vince went with the guys that had the most power, which was Shawn and Triple H, because of his daughter leveraging the situation. Brett and Undertaker were told to basically move aside, and they're not the ones running the locker room anymore. Triple H and Shawn are, and that's when the whole thing.
I just want to let you know I'm on like 3%. I don't have a charge out here. I'm about to die, so I just wanted to let you guys know my phone's about to conk out.
That's fair. No, that's fair. And we've gone pretty long as it is. But no, I mean, do you agree with what Teddy said?
Yeah, I hear what he said. I just think people have to realize they never sold the finish. They sold the screw job. And I don't know. I don't know whether Brett was in on it or not. But I don't see how the hell he couldn't have seen it coming. I mean, that's just
it's a referee mistake.
Now, here's one thing. Here's one thing, guys. Before I go, because I got 2%. Hefner, the referee, came out last year and said it was all the work, and he said Brett was in on it. So I don't know. Who knows if he's telling the truth or not? But it's a fascinating subject, and the younger fans, I'm about to die. I'm at 1%, but the younger fans need to check that out, man. But thank you guys for having me on. Who knows? It's a mystery, right?
We'll have you back on. Plug your stuff real quick if you got time.
Yeah, I don't really have time. I'm about to lose, but buy the book, Matthew J. Granahan. Message me on Facebook, and I'll get you a signed copy of Rough and Tumble. Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure, man. Have a great night.
You too. Thanks, King.
Thank you.
Take care, buddy.
Thank you.
I should let all my listeners digest everything that we're saying here. And I know there was a lot of information out there, guys, but if you have to listen to it 2 or 3 times, I recommend really studying what we're saying here, because I don't think anyone else has gone into detail about some of these subjects. I just personally, I've listened to a lot of podcasts and I talk to a lot of people. I haven't heard anybody really look at wrestling the way I'm looking at it, because there's a few third generation guys. I love wrestling as a fan more than I ever did being a wrestler myself.
Yeah, and we covered a lot of topics tonight that, not a lot of people like to talk about, but we also kind of were objective about it too, and having an open mind and looking at things a different way. Like King said, he's very analytical. He likes to, sit back and kind of, especially being a lawyer, look at things objectively. So I think we accomplished a lot tonight. I think it was a fantastic conversation that we had with him. Okay, my friend. Thank you so much for your patience. You got it, brother. I got to go to bed, man. I'm fucking tired. So God bless you. God bless you, man. Have a good night, buddy. Thank you. All right, man. See you.
Thanks for listening to Rebuilding the Foundation with Teddy Hart. To keep up with the latest happenings with Teddy, follow him on Instagram at official Teddy Hart. You can also email us at rebuildingthefoundationpodcast@gmail.com. Join us next time for Rebuilding the Foundation with Teddy Hart, right here on the Rad Rob Radio Network.